Malaysia in Budapest, and an international relations degree from Chuan University, United Kingdom. With our esteemed panel now fully introduced, we are ready to dive into today's discussion. Please join me in welcoming the panelists and moderator to the stage with a round of applause.
First and foremost, on behalf of the faculty management and also the organizing committee for PEKUMA, so let me say a big thank you to White Howard, Azizul, Chuan Maslina for attending our anniversary day. Actually, YB Howard came all the way from Ipoh. I think he left at 6:30 in the morning. So thank you very much for spending your time with me today, YB. And also, and also a huge thank you to the organizing committee for PEKUMA for making this event happen. Thank you for spending your time 2 days organizing and planning this event. And also lastly, thank you very much to the audience here for spending your precious Friday morning. I know in UM actually for context, we don't really have classes on Fridays. So they actually purposely came to listen, to come here and listen. So thank you very much everyone. So today we are obviously going to talk about the Iran conflict. And when conflict happens in the Middle East, like Iran, many Malaysians like us, we usually say or we see it as something that is 1,000 miles away. And however, but in reality, modern conflict is no longer the same in borders or regions. They affect all conflicts and even human rights. And even strategic choices, small countries like Malaysia have to make. To understand the economic implication, we first need to understand the conflict itself. Why Iran, the US, or even Israel are locked in this dangerous cycle of escalation. And because of globalization in this day and age, we are economically entangled to one another. And even with advancements of crazy technology and AI, why are humans still dealing with each other in this day and age? So to kick things off, one must enough. Many people see the Iran conflict as something that emerged recently, especially after what happened in Gaza. From a geopolitical standpoint, how did the relationship with Israel in the US evolve into the tensions that we experience?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Ethan, for the firstly the invitation from PEKUMA to IDFR. I am currently the director for the Center for Political Studies and Economic Diplomacy, and I'm very honored to represent IDFR to your session today. So basically, the conflict that we see is actually what is happening now. It has actually been in the background for so long. The tense relation between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America has been there before. It's just only now coming out into the open with all the happening that is currently going on. So what we can see is after the Islamic Revolution, when the Mullah took over Iran, and that was then headed by the Shah, that was being prompted up by the United States. You could see the tense relation and how the United States have been imposing unilateral sanctions on Iran itself. So from there on, you could see there's proxies going on with United States in one hand, and also Iran supporting various militant groups in West Asia. Namely, if you can see in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, you have Hezbollah, and in Yemen, you have the Houthis, and in Palestine, you have some them supporting Hamas. So all this support has been happening, and you can see Iran has been also maybe having getting some support from Russia, and to an extent, I think China and some other countries that they are close to, because they are being under sanction, right? So what you see, so when the conflict happens, Israel, after the October incident, you could see them taking charge and really going all out to assert, their stance and trying to secure their security. So you could see them then trying to influence the US. And I think the attack on 28th of February, which killed the Ayatollah, is the beginning, because it was never supposed to be like that. I think the US have always been having these simulations, and they know that it's not something that you should do. But I think with President Trump, he has been doing things, and with Iran and US attacking Iran, sorry, with Israel and US attacking Iran, a sovereign country. So it has exposed the whole world to what we have now. So for us, Malaysia, we are a principled and pragmatic country. So we are friends with everybody because we are a trading nation, you see. So what even though the incident, the crisis is in West Asia, which is very far from us, but then we are now being affected because the crisis is now affecting supply of natural gas and the routes, right? So you can see this is what we are having now. And Malaysia, even though we are not a party to the crisis, but we have a big interest in what's happening because it's affecting us also. And we are using our good relations with Iran. For your information, we have established diplomatic relations with Iran since 1968. And we have an embassy in Tehran. However, our embassy is currently being closed temporarily because of the crisis, and is have yet to be reopened. Um, so from there, we use our basically connection with Iran to help secure the safe passage of our ships that is currently in the region. But I think it's not easy because the situation is not stable. So I think yeah, that is the situation that we have now.
Correct. Thank you, Maslina. However, given that the conflict in Iran is always constantly escalating, what is the risk of a continuous wider escalation, including maybe possible land invasion by the US or Israel, or even other regional partners? And when the troops are on the ground, how was can get?
Oh, thanks, Stephen. Thank you for all coming and thank you for still being awake. It's a bit of a dry topic, but it's a hot one nonetheless. I think I'll be the first one to go to sleep if I wasn't here, because I did wake up quite early this morning. Thanks for the invitation. We went straight for the kill. And I think just from the offset, I must just say that I have no idea what the US is going to do. And in fact, I don't think the Pentagon knows what Donald Trump wants to do next. I don't think even Pete Hegseth really knows. Because it really depends on which side of the bed Donald Trump wakes up. I'm sure this is what my husband thinks, but she can't say it. I will. Um, I think the volatilities in policy, the inconsistencies with what one expects of the largest military power in the world, that is the US, with the realities of the ground. We're seeing the data. I think this is part and parcel of a big charade behind a larger agenda. I can talk to you about what the potential permutations of um, happenings could be. But if I tell you I know what Trump's next move is, I'm talking complete crap. Because I don't even think Donald Trump knows what he wants to do, right? Uh, it all depends on how markets react. That's what I'm going to say before I land myself a libel case by Donald Trump. I think if one was to discuss the possibilities of a landing version, it definitely it wouldn't be from, uh, I certainly don't think it would come from the landing of some kind of a warship onto the coast from the Straits of Hormuz. Because if one was to really study the geography along the Straits of Hormuz, it's all kind of really sharp, pointy hills and mountains. It's like not exactly landing Persian entry point terrain. Um, I think if one was to go from, the southern parts of Iran, yes, there are some degree of um, money and weaponry and artillery being sponsored or channeled through some proxy groups. You've got some Kurd. Kurds is another race within the context of the Middle East. They are seen and known and generally labeled as insurgent groups, militant groups, non-regime, non-Iranian regime supporting groups. They are being given kind of military equipment, artillery to mencari huru hara and essentially create havoc in places where they have influence. But I don't think that would be the landing incursion point. What I do think what is most likely to happen is some kind of boots on the ground, some kind of a close loop occupation scenario on the Kharg Island. Kharg spelled Kharg in English. I can't spell it in Persian because I don't read Persian, not even Arabic. But Kharg Island is essentially an island that is, for all intents and purposes, where related to Iran. So some war game scenarios that I've read tells us that a couple of warships will go near it, kind of try to the landing Persian scenario will just mean that they'll send in hundreds, if not thousands, of boats, highly competent, you know, essentially military elites from the US to essentially just stop and take over the operations of that island. So, one objective is to control oil resources and production capacity of Iran, and by virtue of that, control the cash cow or control the cash or money or financial assets that Iran has, so thereby stopping the capacity of Iran to escalate, right? Um, is that going to happen again? I stress I have no idea. And when one talks about the escalation of the US, one should also talk about the counter escalation of what Iran could do. Now, if there's even the slightest hint of a note that Iran smells of that happening, the Iranian side would escalate through the following scenarios. So you're going to see escalation and a pull out from the whatever remains of a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. You're going to see escalated aerial assaults, aerial kinetic assaults. So whatever that would they have, which is half of their aerial capacity, suddenly escalate. So regards to the GCC plays about Oman, because a lot of what is coming into Iran right now is essentially uh, kinetic energy coming from or kinetic, basically bombs when war was more from American bases in the GCC states. And the other one is, I think many of you most of you are doing international trade, right? So one of the 14 choke points, you've got the Galactic Straits, you've got the Panama Canal, and then you've got, of course, got the Straits of Hormuz, and what's the other one? Not too far. What's it called? I've said the Straits of Malacca when this thing. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal, but it's not really a global choke point. It's just a Middle Eastern intra-GCC and intra-Middle East choke point. The other one is Bab el-Mandeb, which is basically where Djibouti is, where Djibouti and Yemen is. And what's one of the key players, military actors in Yemen? The Houthis, right? So it is likely that the IRGC will mobilize the Houthis to close Bab el-Mandeb, which controls another 25 to 30% of global oil trade. So what you're feeling now, right now, oil prices this morning is sitting around 80. A couple of weeks ago, it went as high as 118. And this is still with the blockade happening in the Straits of Hormuz, right? But if you've got the Straits of Hormuz blockaded, and if you have Bab el-Mandeb blockaded as well, either by Houthis or whatever, you're going to see 150, 160 oil prices in Brent. So the worst may not necessarily just be a land incursion by the US, which I must say I can't see happening immediately, but again, it really depends on which side of the bed Donald Trump weighs not on. But the real threats are further escalation on the economic war that we are already above. I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, Edward. Talking about Mr. Azizul, Hisham Hussein, economic advisor for PMS, mentioned in a Bloomberg interview last week that even if the war ends today, it will take around 6 months for global oil supply. So, can you please maybe paint us a clearer picture on how this will affect everyday Malaysians like the young people in this room today?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. I'm going to do this a bit differently. I like teaching, so I'm going to address students directly. And yeah, it appears that you're going to have class Friday. So there's a cliche saying that you know it's a terrible waste to you don't waste a crisis. You always learn something crisis. And especially for young people studying economics, this is the time to actually learn the mechanics of how things work. I used to work in finance, in trading a long time ago. So there's a saying in trading, when there's a crisis, 2008, a subprime crisis, when the sea recedes, then you know who's not wearing pants. Orang yang mandi tu, dia tak pakai seluar, air seluar, then we know who's not wearing pants. So same thing, COVID crisis, right? Going into COVID crisis, I think the general mindset was that oil is losing its influence in industries or in economics in general. But as we get out of COVID, there was a spike in inflation, remember? So that was teaching moment, especially for students studying economics, right? You learn about supply chain, you learn about all these interlinkages in trade and industries. So same thing happening right now. Definitely we'll see inflation increasing, but how does that work? So for you guys, so inflation data came out 2 weeks ago, April 1.9%. It's not remarkable 1.9%, right? But you guys as students, you guys need to download the Excel sheet from Gozem and look at the each of the 13 components of CPI and look at the dynamics, underlying dynamics behind inflation. So you will see that transport costs has risen. Food and beverages component is kind of moderate, but if you look at the data long enough, then you understand that it will feed the transportation costs and raw material costs will feed into food and beverages. And that will show up maybe this month's data or next month's data. So that way, you're not only saying inflation is rising due to this crisis, but you learn the mechanics of it. 2 days ago, the trade data was published. We've been doing really well with exports. But again, go back to the Excel spreadsheet. And Gozem is doing a great job at sharing detailed data. So in the old days, you want to look at the data, you download typically in take Persatuan and you have to ini kan. Sekarang semua dalam Excel. You can do it. So if you look at the latest trade data, of course we've been doing really well in response. But look at the import component, right? So the manufacturing or petroleum related manufacturing component of imports has risen 141% in April. So if you look at enough, like all this data, it will shape your understanding of how the economy works. Right? You tengok inflation, you tengok CPI, you tengok API, resale price index, then look at the latest trade data, and also consumer sentiment, right? So all of these things will feed your understanding of how the economy works and how this crisis will impact our lives.
All right. Thank you, Azizul. Moving forward to Wani Hong. So, as a member of the Special Select Committee on International Relations and Trade, is there anything you're allowed to tell us from those briefings? And what is the decision-making process of the leaders in those rooms? What is our first, second, or third priority?
The short answer is I can't tell you anything. The mechanism, according to Praharapshara, the standing orders of Parliament, anything that is discussed in those rooms or in that room, until and unless the report, a detailed report, or however detailed it may choose, we choose for it to be, gets tabled to the August House, we can't say anything. And does it drive or does it inform decision making by the government? I have no idea. Because that's certainly our intention. The hearings that we conduct, the information that we compile is certainly intended to be informative and influential towards the decision making, or at least serve as intel to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which will then feed further decision making to the government in general, which will affect the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense, MIER, etc., etc. So that's certainly our intention, but does it actually affect the decision of the government vis-a-vis cabinet and prime minister? I can't tell you. You asked the wrong question then, dude.
Alright. Maybe to Juan Maslina, maybe you could share with us maybe a bit on the priorities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs regarding maybe this Iran conflict and also the global world order that we have today.
Before we are sitting in like near the level the mic attract. Anyway, for Malaysia, the way we see how things are going made us realize that what we have now, because okay, Malaysia is actually we we are actually among the most outspoken nation in the region following the 28th February strike. So we have been condemning the attacks that has been happening in Iran as a violation of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and international law. And our position in this matter is actually very nuanced. We are firm in our principle, which is against the attack, but however, we are very pragmatic in our approach because the United States of America is and has been among the top four trading partner of Malaysia. So we have to balance the line between us opposing the action, but at the same time appealing to them using the connections that we have through our embassy and also business contacts as well. So what we do is while we firmly support Iran, we also continue to engage with the United States in trade. And this was mentioned by our Prime Minister in April 2026. And we are also using our leverage that we have within our relationships with China and also with Russia to also urge them to use their influence to work towards the escalation of the conflict. And also, if you look at Malaysia, have this principle of non-interference, especially in domestic issues of a country, because we respect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity, and Malaysia is also driven by our national interests. So what we would do is we would use all possible means to ensure that our strategic interest is maintained. And that is where you would also see the Prime Minister contacting the President of Iran to get your assurance that our ships and Malaysian vessels would be safe and can have safe passage. Yes. So whatever that is in the government's control, we will do what we need to do. But however, as you know, there are a lot of parties to the incident as well. So I think for Malaysia, we also mitigate the economic disruptions that we have been experiencing through our diplomatic ties with the Gulf states, which are critical to our, to Malaysia in securing our oil supply. And also we are using the ASEAN solidarity to provide a collective platform for us to call for the free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. So these are, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is coordinating with the Ministry of Economy in ensuring that our diplomatic efforts align with the economic continuity that is needed. So that is what I think the government is doing and continue because Malaysia stands ready to facilitate in ensuring that de-escalation happens and the blockade would stop and the situation would continue to normal.
Thank you, Pak Maslina. Maybe how Juan Maslina mentioned that Malaysia has been pursuing a foreign policy that is secure and not engaged. But moving forward, as tensions rise not just in the Middle East, but also between major superpowers like China and the US, does Malaysia face an increasing pressure to actually take clearer geopolitical urban economic positions?
I obviously think that we've made our geopolitical and geostrategic and geoeconomic position very, very, very clear. And I think we've been clearer than most other countries in the world. We take the sort of we take the overt position of being strategic active neutrality, which means that, I mean, yes, US is within the top four of our trading partners, but they're also our largest investor by far, by quite far. I mean, of course, China is also our largest trading partner by far. So our position is, US, you're our friend. We don't like what you're doing, but you're still our friend, and keep investing, and they do keep investing. And we are still definitely in fairly good trading and diplomatic relationship with them, despite clearly both Parliament and the government has said very, very clearly that we don't like what they do. It's wrong, wrong, and wrong, and wrong. And of course, I think sometimes we we sometimes miss some parts of the larger picture. Not saying we miss the whole part. There are certain parts that are covered with blind spots. Uh, your question was aimed at on which side do we stand, Iran or US, right? But actually, US is a misnomer in this discussion in terms of trade. And in fact, I was quite shocked when we did have a select committee. One of the questions that arose, and I'll talk about the answer, but one of the questions that arose was, Iran trade more with Malaysia, or does the GCC trade more with Malaysia? Let me give you some publicly available statistics. Iran trades with Malaysia, traded with Malaysia 2.4 billion 2025. Right. So that's in MIR. Doesn't sound like a lot, does it? It's not a lot. The GCC, however, which is one thing that I'm trying to say to you, with what you would say is a bit spicy. The GCC, the neighbors, stakeholders, co-stakeholders along the Strait of Hormuz, they trade with us 30 times, around about 90 billion with Malaysia, 2025. Now, did you know that if you happen to be in a room speaking to GCC state actors, whether ambassadors or basically businesses, it would as though they don't stand in solidarity with him. Funny that. Why? You will hear accusations that Iran targeted their sovereign soil, civilian infrastructures, as well as military installations. We have heard, and we will read in the news and continue to read, that Iran did indeed target military installations in the GCC countries, UAE, Saudi, what you call it, in the six countries. But are they the sovereign military installations and infrastructure of the GCC countries, or the American army bases? You will hear from Iran that actually it's the American bases and American and Israeli businesses, which is interpreted as civilian infrastructure. But the GCC countries wouldn't tell you the second part. They will just say that they are targeting civilian infrastructure. So I can tell you that even amongst the six GCC states, Bahrain are very overtly pro-American. And we would even, I would even argue that they sound more like an Israeli ally than an Iranian ally. No? You think I'm talking crap, but this is really what it sounds like when you have further bilateral conversations. So it's really confusing. Sebab kat sini kita kan dengar, kan kita sesama Islam, negara sesama seperti Islam, but on the ground, when it's start hearing, they are not Muslims. I have heard these conversations. They, meaning Iranians, are not Muslims, they're Persians. I have heard these accusations, which to me is takfiri to the highest level now. But nonetheless, when it comes to the trade part, very often we get in this dichotomy. Do we support the US agenda, or do we support the Iranian? While we keep ourselves within this framework of solidarity with Iran, and it is not one or the other. But I'm gonna why, because I think you understand why it should be the other. I've just spent the last 5 minutes explaining that. But if I was to be a devil's advocate and throw this curveball at you, what if, what if, what if this entire thing that we're witnessing started off with Israel going in, not just this time round, not on the 29th of February, back last year when the first missile hit basically the Iranian embassy. If we were to go as far back as that, all these hostilities, all these military action, all this kinetic action happening is essentially one big plan by Israel, supported by the United States, to control Middle Eastern oil. Knowing full well Bahrain, UAE, Arab Saudi, etc., GCC is pretty much under the US and Israeli thumb. What if the agenda was to, I'm not saying it is, but what if the plan is to have Israel and US control Middle Eastern oil in total? What would you do if you happen to be the Prime Minister of Malaysia? Or you happen to be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, or you happen to be a member of the cabinet that will feed into the final decision the geopolitical positioning that Malaysia can, should, and is taking. Now that is a scary question I would leave for you to think about.
Thank you, Abby. So talking about oil, back to you, Mr. Azizul. Many Malaysians assume that because we have Petronas, we are relatively still protected from global energy shocks. But realistically, in Malaysia, how vulnerable are we in terms of oil supply and reserve? And is that maybe macam a 6 month atau a 12 month depending for us if the war does stop or does not stop?
Okay, thank you. So the thing that we commonly hear is that Malaysia is a net exporter of energy. Sometimes it's mislabeled as net exporter of oil. So energy includes gas, not exclusively oil. So if you look at the trade data again, you can look this up. Yeah, 2 days ago, trade data just was published. We export more LNG than crude, and we import a lot of crude. So the way that the oil and gas ecosystem globally works is that if you just look at where this crisis is how it troubles different continents differently. Like in the US, it's at the petrol station, right? In Europe, it's fuel for airlines. In Asia, it's crude. So different countries, different places have different capacity of processing and use for different types of energy. So like in Indonesia, they still use a lot of gasoline, minyak gas, right? Per liter. So this crisis is affecting different countries differently. So for us, we still need to import a lot of crude. About 50% of our crude is from the Middle East, 20% Saudi, almost 20% from the UAE. So we use crude and process it. So for petrol, the car, our airlines use it. So there is this element of dependency, not as much as our neighbors are depending on imports from the Middle East, but we do have a certain amount of dependency on fruit from the Middle East. And eventually this will we will deplete our reserve, whatever reserve that we have. The government has been saying we have up to June. So the government's working on the basis of certain yeah, so the government's working on the basis of certain assumptions of where food is. Now that food has gone down a bit, maybe we have a bit more space. But again, I'm going to be an uncle and lecture you guys. For you guys, young people who are studying economics, um, this is just another crisis. Okay, 2022 Ukraine invasion. Last year trade, right? Last year, if we were here last year, we think like dunia nak terbalik because of Trump tariffs, right? But we're thinking the same thing this year because of the war. It might be something else next year, right? So for you guys, what you guys need to think about is how can our economy be able to uh, more flexible, have the ability to grow, and we have all these levers or tools to face any kind of challenges. So somebody in MOF, maybe Indonesia, is looking at this government fiscal position. We have our fiscal position is our fiscal space is quite limited now. Fiscal space is our budget what we can do within that budget. So on the revenue side, um, in the structurally, there's a lot of issues. Also on the expenditure side, for you guys learning all these tools in faculty economy, this is the real challenge. It's of course every year we have crisis, but in the future, how can we um, generate more revenue from different kinds of taxes? How can we alleviate dependency on PITA, petroleum income tax, which is very volatile? That's what the government has been trying to do for some years now. And on the expenditure side, people talk about subsidies, consolidating subsidies. All of them are structural issues that you guys can help to solve. You know, when you go into JPA or you enter politics and work in banks, you work in EPF, all these kind of structural issues that we confront right now need serious work. You need to have the tools, you need to work hard, and you need to work against all these TikTok economies. So you have the tools, you have to think further down the road. What can we change in the structure of our economy? Because what the current generation of civil servants, economists are working against is, you know, TikTok economics. Everything is so simple. Everything is, you know, we have a crisis. Every time it's kerajaan gagal. I mean, not this government, previous government. Every time this kerajaan gagal. But and over time, because our fiscal space is narrowing, your generation, nanti, when there's a crisis, another war, there's less things you can do about it. So you guys need to work on it. Look at what kind of problems you can help to solve.
Maybe just a small follow-up question. So I think yesterday we saw the news that RON 95 rose to 407 cents, RON 97 to 485 cents. So back to that subsidy question, given that Malaysia's long-standing fuel subsidy system has been in place to basically protect our and for cost of living measures, how difficult will it be for the Malaysian government to continue to balance these subsidies? Or will we continuously see a continuous increase in RON 95 and RON 97 prices?
Definitely, the issue of subsidy is something challenging and ongoing. It's going back to the structure of the economy. On the expenditure side of the government, we spend tens of billions of ringgit um, on all kinds of subsidies, not just oil. There's a lot of different welfare programs, and the governments in quite into this work. I'm not speaking on behalf of the government, but what I observe is that the government has a plan to consolidate and make subsidies more focused, efficient, so the delivery is more, it's targeted and more effective. Okay. And this requires data. So I think if you're learning economics now, I expect you guys to do a lot of data. So the challenge for the government, you have to be, yeah, you collect this data. You already have an idea of who's buying what, who needs what, by how much. The next step is, you have to perhalusi this data. People now talk about the inadequacy of the B40, F40, EP20 categorization. Yeah. That's all data. Going back to your learning in economics. So you have to think about how can we be more precise, how the government can be more precise in identifying who needs what. That way, future consolidation of subsidies or future delivery of aid, it will be more efficient. So I think right now the government is um, it's a tough situation. Part of it is technical budget, part of it is also political. But for you guys, you can't do this TikTok economics thing because you understand behind all government policies, there's you guys, anyone in this world yang understand about trade-off, you guys should understand it best, like trade-offs. So whatever the government's doing, there's a trade-off somewhere. So you have to understand if you disagree with the government, you you disagree about trade-offs and making this call. It's not because uh, the government is gagal. It's tough choice.
All right. Thank you, Azizul. Maybe to YB Howard. 2 weeks ago, we had YB Ahmad Nasir, Menteri Economy, on one of our forums for PEKUMA, talking about biodiesel. So, given that the Iran conflict is happening and our oil prices are being heavily affected, is it time for Malaysia to actually look for maybe alternative energy sources?
Absolutely. Finally, you're asking me something that I know a lot about. I own a petrol station. Um, fuel source. I think. Right. Who drove here today? I was like, who drives here? Put hands up. Maybe no driver. Who uses public transport as a habit? We're all really good people. Student only, right? But if you were to go to like any events out, outside of the world of Universiti Malaya, you would see at least a good 90 to 95% hands up when I ask who drives. Mobility as a whole in Malaysia is still a love affair with private vehicles, and by and large, by facts and figures, 95% or above of the vehicles on the road in Malaysia are still fossil fuel based, right? Um, is this now an opportune moment, a lesson that one must learn in this crisis, an opportunity behind the crisis to push towards greener, more sustainable fuel source to replace the fossil fuel energy that drives our mobility? Is it just about cars, private cars? Is it just about EVs? Is it about PHEVs? Or is it a much larger conversation about logistics, sustainable energy logistics, public transport, better public transport, bigger investment in infrastructure behind public transport, ART, BRT, MRT, LRT, whatever T's there are. I think that conversation should be much larger about that, rather than just talk about biodiesel, which is still a combustion carbon emitting model. I'm not saying, I'm not discounting that. I'm not discounting that. But why are we not in further discussions about electric based mobility? Yes, many of you are asking the how di bullshit punya lah. Okay, electric pun bayar bantul mah. Why don't we have that conversation, that deeper conversation about transitioning away from dirty or fossil fuel based electric? Then what does that bring us to? New? Do we want to have that conversation? Should we be having that conversation? Yes, we should. Well, are we? Sorry. Akmal is a good friend. He's a fantastic mind. But I must comment that I think not just the ministry, the Minister of Economy, but I think the government as a whole should be pushing the conversation further, deeper, implementing incentives, policies, driving savings behind a complete transition of energy modalities. Right? And yes, I started this intervention by saying that I own a petrol station, I don't operate a petrol station. So who the hell am I lobbying for the world to transition away from my own business? Because the world needs us to do that, and our country needs us to do that, because the disruption caused by global gangsters like the US and Israel has caused us and given us this sudden enlightenment that whatever happens, not thousands of miles, not 1,000 miles, is actually 3,900 miles, 6,900 kilometers away in Iran and surrounding countries in the GCC. That is affecting our fundamental understanding of what an economy is. Right? It's affecting our lives. And you guys believe that, in your smug student style, say, no, we public transport, we don't drive. But there are people out there those like me and Azizul who still have to drive and have to have that debate and have to have these arguments behind closed doors of range anxiety. Of if I was to get my next EV because I want to be a responsible member of our civilization, our society, our country, and transition towards having a full EV. Well, range anxiety. Ang ni hari-hari ka na pergi mana seminggu ka na pergi KL 2 hari. Kau bawa EV. Nanti hang jam pun recharge jam 14 aku yang kena mai selamatkan hang. These are conversations. Then we then go into that conversation of let's come up with a compromise, let's go PhD. Then there is still this notion of using fossil fuel based or combustion based fuel. So that really should be, in my opinion, I'm not telling you what you need to discuss and think about, but I would urge the conversation to go beyond, because we've got lots of palm oil, and I'm a great supporter of the palm oil industry. upstream, side stream, the entire ecosystem. But I think the conversation should be about how do we transition away from current energy modalities that we know, because it's not sustainable.
All right. Thank you, Howard. Juan Maslina, this will be our last question for the forum session, and then after that we'll open it up to the Slido question. So to anyone in the crowd, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to scan the QR code and fill out the questions in the website. All right. Juan Maslina, how much of a role does or did President Trump's leadership style out of his personality play compared to the national US policy in regards to the Iran conflict that we saw today?
I think while you Howard nailed it in the head when he said that, because if you see when Trump came to power, what he did was to immediately undermine multilateralism by refusing to pay the US dues to the United Nations, and I think he instructed the United States to from several international bodies, and you can see him then establishing the Board of Peace that's aligning United Nations altogether, because you can see Board of Peace is taking over a role that is in international body in the United Nations to do things at his bidding, and he is setting the stage, if you can see that. So that is what we can see when he came to power, and I think all of the other nations are now thinking how we can react to such a behavior, because and also he is undermining international law to an extent, because whatever he has been doing is totally against law, and I think anything anybody else says does not matter to him. So I think it would be a very interesting few years that he has to complete his second term as the United States president. So for us, Malaysia, we would, because the United States is one of our largest trading partner, and we have this very important economic ties with them. So we would still continue to maintain our economic pragmatism in relation to the United States. However, we can see Trump also weaponizing tariff as a yes, he is doing that. Even though of international trade has declared his unilateral tariffs on countries as illegal, and that cannot be done. But I don't think Trump listens to anybody, and I think at the end of the day he has his own interests, I would think. But then the United States would still have a good relation with them, because we have always have good relation with everybody, the States, China, Russia, Iran, the GCC, because it is essential to Malaysia's strategic interests. And foreign policy is an extension of our domestic interests. So we will make sure that we still remain principled in our stand against invasion of our territorial integrity and that of other sovereign states. But at the same time, we are pragmatic in our need to maintain good economic relations with other countries, especially our main trading partners.
Can I add a bit to that? First, I fully agree that foreign policy, international trade policy is economic policy. You must all know that. Not trying to lecture you as an uncle, but always think that international trade and foreign policy is economic policy, especially in this, you know, in I want to tell you how, in real world terms, how this complete total ignorance towards multilateralism by Donald Trump is affecting the world at a functioning level. Everyone knows what the UN is, right? Maslina just said that Trump refused to pay their dues, or like vastly their dues to the United Nations because he thinks that the Board of Peace should be his answer to the United Nations because he wants to rule the world, basically. That's why he's being chummy and friends with Putin, and he's being chummy and friends with Xi Jinping because he thinks that with these three global superpowers coming together, if he can get them on side, yeah, he can completely and totally sidelize and ignore the United Nations. But his refusal or his reduction of dues to the United Nations, the United Nations is coming up to its 80th anniversary. There's a UN 80 plan, which should be an expansion of the functions of the global government against the United Nations. But you know what is happening? I'm the Secretary General of the Asian Forum for Parliamentary Population and Development. We're a 30-member state organization, a multilateral platform, specifically focusing on population and demographics studies issues pertaining to fertility, basically ageism of society, youth policy, women policies, gender policies, etc., etc. Right? We are an official implementation partner to UNFP, the United Nations Population Fund, a UN agency. Right? In the UN 80 plans, because of the reduction of dues paid by the United States, instead of talking about expansion UNFPA's work, what is on the table is a strategic amalgamation of UN women with UNFPA. And what does that sound? Cukup duit, dua department kena cantumkan jadi satu. Which means that programs on addressing fertility issues in Southeast Asia, because Malaysia is an aging nation, China is an aging nation, Thailand is an extremely aging nation, our region needs more work and more programs to address fertility issues. But no, UN is having to cut on programs to do with fertility, to do with birth rates, to do with aging, and to do with women and youth empowerment. This is what's happening. This is what Trump is doing to the world. I stress it's not the United States, it's Donald Trump. And we need to be aware of what's happening. Thank you.
Okay, just a bit to add to Wendy Hamilton's convention. Metro station will be doing well now.
It's not.
It is
Way down.
really.
As a that's so see 10%.
So going back to Wendy Hamilton's point about EV and just a different way of relationship with energy. All this while, like the war has been going on since late February, right? Have you had any complaints from China, after Romania, working from home or reducing hours for people who work? Again, so there's a shift in the structure of the economy in China. Again, a class. So when you deal with data, especially like inflation, a shock in the economy, you know this, like there's permanent change and there's temporary change. Temporary change usually macam inflation shock, it's temporary, the central bank doesn't do anything. There's permanent change that shifts the economy or prices to a different level than the government central bank needs to do something. So what we see with the transition in the structure of the Chinese economy, you don't hear complaints about minyak. Of course, they have sizable crude reserve, but the way that the economy is running is different. If I go to China, it's totally different now, right? The way that um, renewable energy is so much part of the economy, right? Of course, when we think about Malaysia, when we are transitioning, of course, there's some pain points, things, little things that you complain about, that any service or whatever, but it's um, it's a leap, right? And and a leap towards something that changes the structure. You shouldn't be afraid of little inconvenience or things that will be resolved over time. Macam when we change to QR tap via all this banking system, digital payment, right? Initially, there's little problems here and there, but now it's out of life. It's the same thing with energy transition. Is the question.
All right, thank you to all three panelists. Moving into the Q&A session. So do feel free to continuously put in your slide of questions. Okay. Maybe while I go through the slide of questions and the slide of questions are still coming on, maybe just one simple question to all three panelists. If you guys were your 22-year-old self today, Simon, so if you guys were 22-year-old today, what would you have maybe just kept the same, or what would you have done differently? Is this generation different than six?
I'll probably still be the same 22-year-old that I was. I'll be on the streets telling the government what to do. I'm doing now, because I think there is a role for the activists in every society. When I was 22, I couldn't really afford to be an activist, but I was always involved in some degree of activism. I was too busy working, too busy trying to make ends meet as a young career climbing F&B professional. But I was part of a union, and I always had some degree of my time and resources dedicated to activism. Now, if I was to be in Malaysia, I would probably be in a much better place to still put more time in activism. And I would say that there are those of you here who are economists, or going to be economists, going to be or aspiring business professionals. You guys are actually the most suitable people to be an activist because you understand the realities, or are trained to understand the realities of business, and is trained to understand the realities of economics, and trained to understand the realities of the world. And then what you would choose to be an activist for would probably be for the betterment of the country and the people. So some of you, not all of you, choose the path that I could, but if I was you, if I were you at 22, I would still choose the path that I chose back then.
Maslina?
Okay, at 22 years old, I would still be maybe finishing my studies as an international relations graduate. So for me, now you can see they find that the younger generation is more into social media, because then we do not have social media at all. So I would think that, because I'm quite a boring person, so I would think that I would just maintain to be that. But it's important maybe for me to continue to be aware of what's happening through our readings. Reading is very important, because I think sometimes when you rely too much on, especially now, it's very easy for you to get information through AI. And my fear is when you rely too much on AI, when you do not know it is very difficult for you to differentiate between the right information and I know what what are the hallucinations because for me I think if I know everything that you can do that and you can sense whether it makes sense or not. If you present AI and just present it without actually doing due diligence, then I think it's gonna be quite scary. So for me, I will maintain how I am. But I feel like for the younger generation, so far I have very good colleagues that are starting to join the surveys and things like that. But I think we can see, like my daughter, she's 11, and her greatest fear is actually striking conversation with people that she doesn't know. And I find maybe this is because they tend to just rely on playing games and your interact. So you really need to strike a conversation with somebody that you hardly know. And for them it's very difficult. They are very friendly people that they know, but for you so well it's still something that I feel is important if I am a young person now to be able to have good communication skills. You don't have to have great communication skills that can be developed, but you can start with having good communication skills, getting your ideas across, and also learning from other people because sometimes when we are young we tend to think that we are reading and I think all these old hobbies are like boring and talking about very boring stuff but sometimes things happen. It has happened before and economy is actually a cyclical economy. The thing whatever has happened before and only the environment then will be a bit different and the coping also will be a bit different. Stop.
Cheers.
I don't even remember what we did when I was 22 now. But so that's a good thing. I fine. And yeah, what I would say is things will be okay. So you young people right now today face so many challenges. So you think, but every generation thinks that every day. So now you have AI, you go into job market, which is maybe you feel uncertain, and also challenges in the structure of the economy, how AI is going to impact the workplace and things like that. But as while you are a student, you need to be learn the technical stuff because that's you're here. Um, if you're learning statistics, just go at it because you know orang tua people like anak saya nak belajar now everybody wants to learn data science, computer science, whatever. My generation is going to engineering. My generation, everybody orang belajar engineering, but if you study in the US, you go to banking. Today, people will use technology, but there's not as much technology jobs. If you think about it, the better the technology, the less people they need, right? But the point of learning technical stuff, where you're going to, even as economists, economics is very technical today. I don't think I can pass. But the idea is not that you are going to work in a job that is implementing data every day, implementing, people who all these universities opening up, making AI and computer science and all. It's not that you're gonna work in doing data and coding and Google, you work at Google or Facebook or whatever. It's the way you will shape your thinking about work. And it's um there's a you take the way that it shapes the thinking, your generation should be better than our generation. Right? So all these challenges that the world poses on you, whether it's AI, whether it's the economy, whether it's the ringgit, whatever that will come to you in the future, you have better tools and way of thinking, and you're better prepared to face these challenges because you have this technical training, not because you're computing every day. You just look at the type of discourse that's happening in neighboring country when they are so their currency is in trouble right now, right? You, yeah, our currency is right now. Big trading is control because this is a country, and the way their leaders address this problem, their society address this problem, it's different. We address or have conversation. So
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to the slide of questions. Then this will be maybe one person that can answer this question. Malaysia is not part of Trump's organization. What is holding Malaysia to join?
Malaysia is a member of the United Nations. We would prefer for any solution and any actions that is to be taken to solve the situation in Gaza to be done through the multilateral institute, which is the United Nations. I think that is the main reason why we do not, we did not consider joining the Board of Peace. Because for us, we believe in multilateralism and the role that should have been played by the United Nations.
Another question. This one, actually, Azizul and maybe how to answer. I feel like Malaysians rely too heavily on government subsidies. What is your opinion on the Malaysian government if they will cut oil subsidies? cheaply?
Wow, really went for the jugular, right? Conan. Do you know why I'm sitting in front of here? Do you know why in front of my name there's a YB? There's something called democracy. Democracy is a double-edged sword. It allows for the people to express you, the people to express our will, our likes, our dislikes through something called a vote in a system called representational democracy, where once every 5 years, perhaps less, you choose 222 people to represent you at the highest law-making body called Parliament. Now, how many UN students or how many places are there out of the entire Malaysian population gets enrolled into the highest higher education institution of Malaysia? How many enrollments does UN take a year? Anyone can enlighten me? How many creme de la creme of Malaysian society gets enrolled into the number one higher education institution of Malaysia? In the hundreds, in the thousands, couple of thousand. Which means that less than 0.0001% of the entire country gets to become you guys, the smartest of the country. Which means that the rest, the 99.99998 of the country, are not as smart as you. They're not as informed as you. And they're not only not as smart, not as informed, they're not as progressive as you. So, because you are smart, you are progressive, you are more exposed to realities and more educated, you can ask the question, Malaysia should be less reliant on subsidies and you should remove subsidies entirely. Kesian orang di luar sana. Okay, that's bukan lima. The real answer is, I don't agree with the complete total removal of subsidies. Why? Because if suddenly mobility, which is what we're talking about here, really, if you can't afford to pump petrol into your motorbike or your car because suddenly it's just shot up double, you can't work. When you can't work, it's a loss to your employer in terms of productivity. And if your employer loses productivity because you can't go to work, he loses business because he or she or the employer can't produce for his or her clients. The chain and domino effect of that will cripple, if not collapse, the economy if we were to remove subsidies overnight. You mean removal overnight, or of course a week, or of course a month, or even over the course of a year. Within a fiscal year, you remove all fuel subsidies, the economy will. And who will benefit? The richest of the rich, those who already afford, those who already have huge holdings in the economy. They will have the holding power to survive. Those with already existing enough savings to see through this disruption will survive, and the rest will collapse. So I don't disagree with the concept and notion of being fully unsubsidized as a far concept, but as a policy today, no, because the economy will collapse. I support usaha-usaha untuk pergi ke arah situ dalam tempoh masa 10 tahun, 15 tahun, 20 tahun secara beransur-ansur seperti yang dilakukan dan terserah dimaksudkan oleh bukan saja kerajaan ini dan kerajaan sebelum-sebelum ini. Mungkin dari PEKUMA berjaya, kami cuba sedaya upaya nak berjaya sikit, but I'm not giving you political bullshit. I'm telling you that the economy will collapse if you did it in one fiscal year or even over one term. That's right.
Azizul? All right. Guess we will open it up to the floor by Q&A. So, my brothers, hands, any hands? Okay. Yeah. My brothers.
Hello. Alright, thank you for very good questions. I think all thank you for all of this. My name is Ipoh as Indian Constitution and UN. And my question is, like as we know, the like just now, the stated like I have talked about, even the war ends today, it will still just now the question stated asked about like the supply chain will need to have around 6 months recover. My question is more about how you picture about the Malaysian economy, the future economy. Because right now Malaysia is kind of like insulated from the effect of the Iran war. Then how are you going to picture the future of the economy? Is it will be another COVID crisis, or is it will be another crisis that we have never seen in our life? And another question is, as are we heading into a slow economy, COVID crisis, and realistically, can our targeted fuel subsidy even survive past the next GDP? The last question is like, how long the targeted subsidy will be last long? Is it right after next year, due to the political reasons, or because of like what you say, if target stability will be target balik, the company will collect, so the government won't do this even there's a huge pressure in the fiscal government fiscal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your question. So, as I mentioned before, the fiscal position of the fiscal space for the government to do things is quite limited right now. It's been quite limited for some time. For many types of reasons, we have depended on petroleum income tax. Our tax collection might not be that great. Maybe the rate at which we collect tax might not be on par as similar economies, and we've been subsidizing energy for quite some time. And as the longer we subsidize, the more entrenched the expectation of to some people it becomes kind of like a right or benefit, right? Yeah, so eventually the government will have to, for our economy to have all this flexibility, more fiscal space. Subsidy is one of the easier things to target to be more efficient, because collecting, the harder thing is like asking people to pay more tax or being reliant on Petronas, because that's very volatile, right? So the government would have to do something about the efficiency of subsidies and welfare programs. As far as timing of the rationalization of subsidies, then when we will answer that. But to me, it's something that the government, whoever the next government is, they still need to think about this problem. Right? They still need to, if they want future flexibility in managing the economy, they still need to try to rationalize the current structure of subsidies.
I just want to zoom in on the fact that you said that Malaysia is not insulated. We're not. We're not insulated in any way, shape, or form. The fact that we're having this debate means that we're not insulated. We're living under the hallucination, or at least the impression that we're insulated because there's something called Woody 95. Those who use feel, I mean, of course, you guys feel insulated because you're progressive and you use public transport, driving EVs and stuff. But you are the secular frame of Malaysian society, so you're kind of discounted from this entire conversation. Malaysia as a whole suffers from the crisis of being not bad. We're doing not bad because the government is doing way too much. But because we're doing way too much, and because you feel that you're insulated, whatever it's been a shortcoming. Huwag ka 3 latuin, jadi 2 latuin kung kena hantar. Bukan main. Betul kan? So, we are in this crisis of doing not bad because the government is doing well, so that you feel that you're doing not bad, slash not just doing bad. Senang nak hantar. Okay? Because this is an unprecedented global economic war. It's beyond crisis. I mean, someone did this to us, right? So I would just kind of put some a different basis to your question. Now, for me, towards the end of this year, before the 29th of February, we were heading towards being or achieving the state of high income nation. By the end of this year, read any report from the OECD, from World Bank, we were on track to become a high income nation by end of 26. if not early 27. But we may not achieve that now. Why? Because you've got global gangsters in the name of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu picking a war and putting a chokehold on global economic progress. So economies and economics is dynamic in its very, very nature. So I am not someone who subscribes there is an absolute solid and concrete timeline in which after the election and we will create more subsidy. I don't agree with that because it doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make governance sense. Just doesn't make sense. Like I said, you don't even do that over a term. It's an agenda that is national policy, national policy, national direction, and in Chinese we call it 江启头 or 传统自然是 bila dah sampai pelabuhan kita akan bentulkan kapal, right? And I'm not copying out on you. I'm just saying that number one, I don't think if this government continues to be the next government, or when the next government come in, we'll go, okay, now is a really good opportunity to kwanchong or something. It's gonna work like that. It doesn't work like that. It won't work like that. Why? Because the entire thing is dynamic. And the last point is, I think on the back of what Don Azizul said about the shrinking fiscal space, whilst the shrinking fiscal space, because our dependence on essentially what Petronas is willing to pay us, Petronas in itself is suffering from several fronts of challenges. Number one, Petros situation structurally, there's a I was going to say small changes, not small changes, but a significant change to Petronas in itself. Number two, the oil fields, of which is where the cash cows or the essentially where the cash comes from. The maturation of our oil fields, maturation and therefore productivity has gone down, so the cash source has been low. Number three, the country is still suffering or having to solve or pay toward debt from previous kleptocratic inclinations that we are still suffering from. We're still having to pay back to structural inadequacies of our economy, etc., etc., etc. But the positive frame behind is a lot of the investments that are being in today because of our open mutual active neutrality at the global stage as a foreign policy actor and a trade actor has encouraged and invited and brought in lots of investments. So our tax space is likely to widen significantly. We are also a key player in the world of critical minerals. The world is in absolute hunger for rare earths. We already control 13% of the global rare earth materials, and we are slated, and we are in a position to up that even more because we've got a bucket load of stuff underground that we are still holding back because we are still working to explore and bringing the right partners in to number one, to mine, to extract and separate, to be a key player in the region. So all these are potential widening of our tax base, which is a measure or a countermeasure to the shrinking fiscal space. So not only are we sitting here and saying we cut, we are also widening the injection into our economy to make us fiscally more sustainable.
And back to my first question is just now I asked about the how you think about how you picture the future economy, not using the economy just besides we just talk about the CPI, all the things right all this. But my question is more because right now you see it in Malaysia, some of these guys feel so uncertain. They didn't know how much our oil reserve, all the things, right? So it makes us even some of the analysts recently say that even Malaysian ourselves, we didn't shift our behavior due to this right? Even like the government, like some agency already say, oh, from off. Like you can see, the KL there still stuck as usual. Everyone's still driving. Like our own Malaysia, we don't really even realize because like kind of like I know what you say. It's like we are not totally insulated, but in some sense we are insulated. Like we are still protecting by all these things, but like after it's that like in terms of fiscal, government still have other revenue stream like what is it to cover back this thing. But my question will still be because this thing right is it doesn't just affect the fuel, the energy, it affects other things like the fertilizer, it affect all the agriculture things. Like it ends up we still reflect back to consumer ourselves. My question is how do you picture the future of economy? How it looks like in a more simpler way? Like am I like suffering afterwards? Like because picture all the shipment rate of logistic price increases. And then like not losing economy. Just imagine you are explaining to people that don't know about economy. How would you give me the confidence of the future of Malaysia?
Okay, you all have mobile phones, right? Earphones up. Punch in this number. 012 849 8387. Save it as Howard Lee, the uncle who spoke to you at this forum. Save it first, and I'll tell you why I gave you this number. That's it. Ipoh. Japan Ipoh. Okay, this is my work number, and it's also my broadcasting number. I've written extensively about what the world that Malaysia will look like in the short, medium, and long term. The short term, earlier on in this crisis, it's about the triple crisis. So you've got the fuel and cost, basically the energy crisis. So it's about the fertilizer crisis. Number three is the rare gases helium crisis. Right? In the immediate short term, so 0 to 3 months time, you're gonna see a lot of shit. Things are gonna be bad. Immediate, crashingly severe inflationary pressures will hit you in the face. You may or may not agree. I don't think you have a choice. Because, of course, I'll give you an example. For each 1 liter of 199 Budi 95, RON 95 that you're pumping into your car, the government is paying right now 204 or 205. So the government is paying more than what you're paying for you to use petrol. Right? To a certain extent, well, for economists, that is going to have some degree of inflationary pressures to the economy, right? So what would that mean? Things are going to get more expensive. Within the next few months, you're going to see not even going as far as commodities like palm oil. That will come 6 to 9 months because essentially the yield is going to go down because many plantations have chosen not to fertilize because raw materials for fertilizers is so expensive that some local fertilizers are choosing to only sell their production overseas because that's where they're getting better margin. They are holding back what they would have otherwise sold to local consumption and domestic demand so that they can last for another couple of months because they're only selling at a higher margin to international markets. Supaya dia boleh tahan 2-3 bulan lagi. Right? So there are certain plantations, ladang-ladang, yang choose not to fertilize, so therefore 6 to 9 months down the line, yield is going to go right down, so commodities will go down, prices will then go up, then you see the downstream from that, right? Helium. Now, a lot of people think helium is 0.001 of our economy in terms of import, right? Who cares? But it's like oxygen. You don't feel the importance until you run out of it. So MRI machines, I know only about 40 to 50% of existing MRI machines uses large amounts of helium, but you're also talking about basically the microchip, the semiconductor, essentially the chip fab, wafer fab industry that I know there are only 3 wafer fabs in the country, but we've brought in lots of businesses who are supposed to start producing in terms of fab, in terms of design, semiconductor, microchip, advanced manufacturing uses helium. There's going to be an impact there because helium's going to run out, right? And some people say, oh, we get our helium 70% from Singapore. Singapore is okay. But no, Singapore gets 80% of their helium through the Straits of Hormuz. They're just the valve, they're not the source. They go to Singapore, Singapore trade, then comes in. So essentially, we are still heavily reliant on Singapore, and we also buy from Qatar, which is also highly exposed. Singapore is also highly exposed to Qatar, which is exposed to the Straits of Hormuz, and until unless that gets open, we're going to have pressures on that. So helium and also nitrogen, also urea, also ammonia, all these stuffs are byproducts of the petrochem industry. So agriculture should suffer, and essentially the immediate 6 months is going to be ugly. But if we get our acts together, if we build back better, if we start pushing for energy transition at the consumption, at the consumer level, which means that if suddenly we see an uptake in transition towards basically renewable energy, new energy, green energy vehicles, and we see government forcing the living shit out of public transport players to increase the number of roads, more new energy vehicles on the road for public transport, then we will recover better. It is a discussion about recovery. And the horizon of this war, I think we must correct this is not a 2 or 3 months thing. The recovery horizon from this warring conflict is an 12 to 18-month discussion. So the sooner we come away from, oh, hari ini dia perang, dia habis perang, dia pegang tangan, jabat tangan, dah ada peak. Esok, harga minyak turun. The sooner we come away from that hallucination, the better. So I can't give you a pink and fluffy, airy fairy story of everything being okay, right? Number one, it's not election. Number two, you are not my voter. But even if it was election now and you are my voter, I have a responsibility to tell you the truth. Shit is bad. But if we build and if we can hold on to the advantage that we keep the investors here, and we make sure there's helium, because we don't have the necessary negotiation, either buy direct from Qatar or buy from the US, means that prices are going to go up because half of global production of helium comes from the US, or we cut the deal so that Singapore don't hit us when it comes to a real do or die situation. We keep those investors here, the semiconductor industry will thank us. We will have a wider tax base next year and the year after. The EV industry, the PhD industry will thrive. Jobs are created, training, blah, 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 blah. But all this is 18 months or after. The first 18 months between now and then, things are pretty tough.
All right. The next.
Right, so I guess everyone is studying about economy that happen in Malaysia and also in the world. So let's shift into another issues like another discipline. By the way, my name is Hafiz. I'm second year economics student from UM, and my question is directly to YB. Okay. we know we have like some sort of, political views, different political views, and recently, Nick Nasgate and also Rafi Ramli announced they are leaving bersama Mati. So, my question is just a simple one. I just want your opinion about it. What is the effect of the formation of Bersama to Malaysian politics, especially being led by former cabinet members like Rafizi and also Nick Nazmi, and into the next general elections? And how is it going to affect Pakatan Harapan votes and also Malaysia politics in general, since we already in the era of political dynamics is much bigger in Malaysia rather than what 20 years ago. So that's my question to you. Thank you. Um, Let me frame it as this. I think most people ask the question on this effect because I'm from Manila, right? Of course, I would really love to hear your views. But my understanding is, being someone from the 2008 batch, I joined Malaysian politics at the front line as a campaign manager, as a senior campaigner back in 2008. So I kind of understand what Malaysia was pre 8th of March 2008. Uh, I, I personally vested in that entire process since 2008. I contested in my first election as a candidate and subsequently as a Wakil Rakyat in 2013, 2018, 2022. So you and I seemingly both understand that Malaysia has come a long way from single party state. There's some kind of an impression of electoral democracy, but it was an electoral autocracy back then. I said it then, I say it still now. But now, 20 years on, we are now a fully fledged, fairly mature, I would say teenage democracy, right? So democracy gets its strength from its, I don't want to use the word allowance, but its celebration of the contestation of ideas. And a contestation would be a contestation unless it's well multitudinous, right? So lagi ramai, lagi hebat, lagi elok lah. Sepatutnya gitu. But note how I use the word, I didn't use mature democracy. We're still a teenage, adolescent democracy. Which means that perlu sedikit sebanyak masih dipimpini punya demokrasi. Dan sekiranya dalam kerangka demokrasi Malaysia yang agak adolescent, pilihannya terlalu ramai, fair. Aku tak nak sebut dia merosakkan, tapi berpotensi merosakkan. Sebab apabila ditampilkan option kebarangkalian, sesuatu yang nampak elok tetapi isinya kurang, ada potensi merosakkan. Aku bukan sebut Raf dengan Nick ni merosakkan. I never said that. I never said that. But sometimes when the field is shifted, the noise crowds out the main message. The main message for me, what Malaysia needs right now, is a clear transition towards a mature democracy. And in order for that transition to happen, you need a strong economy. And what does an strong economy require? Political stability, political continuity, and political strength. And an overly crowded field may not contribute to that. But Nick was my ketua pemuda in Keadilan
when I was he was the Ketua Pemuda Pakatan Harapan when I was Ketua Setiausaha Pemuda Pakatan Harapan. So we go back a long way. Raf, I'll refrain from commenting. But these are brilliant minds. These are, I would say, well decorated political operatives. They are leaders in their own rights, in only two. I wish them the best. But the country has an agenda, and the country's agenda may require a less noisy and crowded field to transition our democracy towards something that would ensure the better future, the betterment of Malaysia's future. Sorry, diplomatic answer.
All right. One last question.
Hello, my name is Alfa Hanif. I'm from University, Malaysia. My question is, expanding on YB's explanation relating to explanation relating to the fact that shape funding such account for Malaysians, especially due to rising living costs relating to energy and food prices. My question is, uh, do you think that Malaysia's current policy regarding food security and energy is still up to date with current Iranian context, the Iran conflict context? And if not, how do you think that it should be improved on to be more updated and relevant? Thank you.
I think Azizul can also help with this answer. You know, humans, the human race, the human species is a resilient one. It's resilient in the fact that we're also quite flexible and quite responsive. And because the economy is run by humans, that resilience and responsiveness is being reflected in how supply chains are being augmented as we speak, right? What Azizul said just now is the Guangspagola of our field. Traditionally, what feeds into Tanjung Pelepas, Tanjung Bin, Pengerang, apa semua comes from the Middle East and have to go through the Straits of Hormuz. Because of what happened, we are now, I can't say absolutely, but we have been exploring and even successful in finding food sources from Latin America and also from Russia. And that means that we are triple the resilience and triple the sustainability in terms of food sources or energy source at its rawest plant from previous. So we are 3 times more resilient than before, right? Now, when we are resilient, means that we are not tied to the previous restrictions, constraints. So for me, in terms of food in terms of food sustainability, in terms of food security, etc., I think the same thing also applies to fertilizers. Now, this discussion, this debate about food security, we didn't just come up just because there was a war in the Middle East, right? Food security has been in the mainframe policy discussion in university and in Putrajaya, in Kementerian, not just KPKM, but across ministries and industries since donkey's years. But I think there is value to be extracted in this proses now. Benda ni dia tiba-tiba mencetuskan satu keazaman dekat untuk transisi. Same with vehicles. So my answer, very simple answer to you is, don't tie ourselves to the shitness that is in front of us and use that shit to guide us around the shit that's in front of us. Like, we don't stamp on it, we don't step on it, so that we are clearer in our minds that where we want to be is not the same pathway that led us to where we are. So you as an economist, you as what course?
Economic finance.
Bila kau kira-kira finance nanti, make sure you pump funding, you approve investment, you approve funding when you work for some investment banker nanti for businesses that shows that they won't trample on the same path that have gotten them into shit, right? Because you will be making decisions like that. Cherish and celebrate things that are different. Don't just keep it formula. That's all I can say to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your attention to the fellow audience. And also thank you to our panelists for being here with us today. Also a huge thank you to the faculty at Prof. Sharoja and also to the organizing committee for PEKUMA. And with that, thank you everyone for coming today. Wishing you all a happy weekend.
I'll just add one. Tadi aku bagi korang number kan. If you want to be up to date with things that I write, set your name and bracket UM. I'll put in my broadcast list and you'll be spammed with my articles. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you once again to our panelists for engaging so meaningfully on the Iran conflict implications for Malaysia's economy. Now, we would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Noor Sharoja, the Deputy Dean of the Initially, the Vice President of the Persatuan Ekonomi, Universiti Malaya, PEKUMA, to come forward and present a token of appreciation to our esteemed guests. The token of appreciation has been thoughtfully prepared by our Honorable Faculty of Business and Economics together with Persatuan Ekonomi, Universiti Malaya, PEKUMA, as a sincere gesture of gratitude and appreciation for your valuable presence and contribution to today's event. First and foremost, we would like to give our heartfelt thanks to Mrs. Maslina Ngah to receive the token of appreciation. Thank you, Mrs. Maslina. Next, we would like to deliver our profound gratitude to Yang Berhormat Howard Lee Chuan Ho. Thank you, Yang Berhormat Howard Lee. Now, we would like to express our heartfelt appreciation, Mr. Azizul Amiludin. Thank you, Mr. Azizul. Last but not least, we would like to convey our sincere gratitude to our moderator, Mr. Leng. Thank you, Mr. Iten. Thank you, Dr. Sharoja and Ms. Shenli for presenting the token of appreciation. We would like to invite all the panelists and the moderator to join us on stage for a group photograph as a memorable token of today's meaningful session. Thank you everyone for your cooperation. Now, we warmly request the session. Before we conclude the session, we now invite the audience to come to the middle to fill the space for good our distinguished guests. Then smile on the count of 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Freestyle 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Time for your cooperation. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to extend our gratitude to all of our honorable guests for making this event successful and as memorable as possible. We would like to kindly invite our esteemed media for exclusive luncheon.